Hey there, welcome back to Mid9M. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to share it with your friends who love a good spooky story. Today we're diving into a chilling tale about a little girl named Maddie who finds herself in a peculiar situation. This story is about more than just a scary encounter. It's about facing your fears and finding courage in the face of the unknown. But be warned, this one might leave you with a shiver down your spine. Let's get into it. Bitterness is like cancer. It eats upon the host. But anger is like fire. It burns it all clean. Maya Angelou, I know of an anecdote, one about a little girl named Madeline. Little Maddie was 7 years old, with dark chestnut hair and wide blue eyes. Everyone thought she would grow up to become such a pretty woman, and a smart one at that. Maddie loved to read books, all kinds of books, fairy tales and history, fantasy and mystery. Her parents were so proud of her for being so smart and pretty and brave. They knew she was special. But they were also scared. You see, little Maddie was sick, very sick. She rarely left her bed. But she had her books and the love of her parents to keep her company. She was brave for both herself and them. Of course, Maddie didn't know any better. One day, on a sunny afternoon in December, not a dark, stormy night in autumn, just a few days after Christmas, Maddie's parents came into her room, full of books and the leftover wrapping paper, all crinkled and sparkling in the sunlight that leaked through her window. They said that they'd have to leave her alone for a while. Not long, just an hour, just enough time to meet with the doctor. They said that they would be right back, and that if there was any trouble, to call them with the phone that was kept on the nightstand, the one next to her bed, the red one. Maddie wasn't scared, and she knew it wasn't a good idea to move around too much. She was just too brave. Her father kissed her on the forehead, her mother on the cheek. Maddie smiled and asked if they could open her window. It was an especially warm day with a clear blue sky. Some fresh air could be good. Maddie's father smiled back as he opened the window. Anything else her parents asked before they left? No, I'll be all right, she said to them. I'll just read a story for a while. And then Maddie was alone, all by herself in that great big house. No sound at all, except for the beeps of the machine, the one that kept check on Maddie's heart. She tried to read her book, but the sunlight that fell on her face made her sleepy. Maddie closed her eyes, for how long she didn't know. Not long enough to dream, but long enough to lose time. To her it was just a blink and nothing more. But she didn't open her eyes willingly. The squawk of crow, a black crow, forced her from the peace of sleep. Well, it wasn't just a crow. Maddie also felt warm, too warm for December and even the best of times. When she woke up, she saw that a crow had perched itself on her windowsill. She also saw something else, something that made her shriek. The chair that was kept in Maddie's room, the chair that her mother would sit in just before bedtime, the chair that should have been empty, had been filled by a stranger. To Maddie, it looked like a person, but also not like a person at all. It had a face, with eyes and a mouth and a nose and all, and it had arms and legs, just like a man's. It was even wearing a suit, a black suit with a white shirt and a purple tie. But this stranger, this man if you will, looked wrong to Maddie. His face had all the right parts, but they were mutilated in ways almost incomprehensible. Shiny and pink in some places, black and crackled in others. He had no lips, and his nose was made of two small holes that flared in and out as he breathed. His eyes were yellow and sunken, never blinking, not even once. His body, while never falling to ash, had small flames dancing up and down the lengths of his arms and face, flickering hot light. His cloths were covered in the stains of blood. He looked much like a burned victim would, before the fires were put out. The machine, the one that kept watch over Maddie's heart, began to beep quickly and loudly. Maddie forgot how to be brave, said the dark man, his words sounding like nails against glass, more of a rasp than a voice. Who are you? Asked Maddie, feeling a bit less frightened. Ag said back to her. Smoke was rising softly from the fires. He seemed to be in pain, but doing his best to ignore it. Somewhat stoically, Lazarus, Maddie said out loud, pronouncing each syllable carefully. That's a weird name. His eyes searched Maddie's face, looking for any sign of expression, but she gave nothing away. His eyes eventually fell upon the book in Maddie's lap, Alice in Wonderland. Maddie nodded her head. Everyone knew that she liked stories, even strangers. Maddie didn't know what to say. She thought the Burning Man was being friendly enough, even if he was scary. But Maddie was alone. She was always alone, she realized. She never got to meet anyone new, so she decided it best to let Lazarus stay. Besides, she loved stories, even bad ones. Okay, she said, you can tell me a story, but you'll have to leave before Mom and Dad come home. I don't think they'd like you. Lazarus inhaled deeply, a wheeze through his mouth and an exhale of smoke through his nostrils. He nodded in agreement. What did she do? Asked Maddie. Lazarus raised his charred hand, motioning for Maddie to wait and listen. Maddie was silent for a moment. So was Lazarus. That was a sad story, said Maddie. Lazarus nodded his head, because he knew it was a sad story, but then again, the truth doesn't pick favorites. I didn't like how the mommy had to die. Lazarus gritted his teeth together. I guess so. But it's still sad that they had to grow up without their mom. Maddie looked at her windowsill. There were 2 more crows perched there. One of them stretched its wings and settled next to the others. She thought it was odd, but said nothing. It was hard for Maddie to tell if Lazarus was happy or sad or angry. His voice was always the same. His face never changed either. Before she could answer, Maddie coughed into a tissue. It was a long, hoarse cough. When she finished, she saw that there was blood soaking through the soft paper. I'm sick, she said, looking at Lazarus. He leaned in close to her, so close that Maddie could count each of his crooked brown teeth. He leaned in close and whispered into her ear. Do you have any stories about sick people? She asked. Once again, Lazarus, the Burning Man, nodded his head. That's okay, she said. I'll still listen. Lazarus placed his bony fingers on his lap and breathed in deep. By now the sun was no longer shining. Overcast had made the sky a light shade of gray, almost white when compared to the crows on the windowsill. More had shown up while Lazarus told his story, so many that there wasn't enough room on the sill for all of them. They were starting to perch themselves on a nearby tree. Maddie coughed some more. I liked that one better than the first. At least it wasn't all bad, she said after her fit of coughs. But why are you telling me all of these sad stories? Lazarus looked at Maddie, never blinking, never smiling. In a voice as black as coal, he said. Maddie looked down into her lap. She did know why, but she wasn't scared. No, Maddie knew how to brave, and not just for herself either. She turned to Lazarus, his face charred and scarred beyond recognition of humanity, former or otherwise, when she asked. Lazarus turned his head to the window, towards the black crows that had gathered. He said to her, the beeps from the machines, the ones that kept check on Maddie, they became irregular, slowing down. Do we have enough time for one more story? She asked him. He replied. Maddie shook her head. She said that it would be okay, that she would still listen, even if it had a sad ending. When Maddie's parents returned, they found her lying still in bed. She had stopped smiling, stopped breathing. They cried into each other's arms. What they had been told by the doctor, they knew it was only a matter of time. Even still, they didn't think that it would be this soon. Their souls had been profoundly crushed, shattered into oblivion. But in a strange way, not in a callous or indifferent way, they were relieved. The weight of the inevitable had been lifted, and in its place a sharp sting. They knew this as they wept, and while gazing out of the bedroom window, they were focusing on the sky, which had grown into a perfect and terrible shade of gray. They were so focused in their sorrow that they never even noticed the burns left on the chair. The crows had taken flight.